So this is an example of an automation that helps you find data from one table and link it to another based on a date condition. So the scenario here is that we have podcasts in one table, and those podcasts have a published date. And in the second table, we have events, which also have dates. And the idea is that on the date that a podcast is published, we want it to go and find events in the other table that happen in a set period of time. And if it finds any, link back to it so we can use those events in show notes. So the configuration here is that in our podcast table, we have a published date, which at the moment is blank. And the basis of this automation is that when you set a published date, that's when we'll go looking and finding those events. We then have some configuration. So we have the number of weeks to match the events in. So at the moment, this is just a formula that writes 3 if you wanted that to be standard, but you could also just have that as a number field and set that custom for each podcast if you wanted to. From there, we also have some fields which convert 2 dates into Unix. I'll go into that in a bit more detail, but essentially you can't use dynamic date fields to find data in Airtable. Airtable gives you smart filters like find me something in the next 90 days, but it doesn't let you do the same thing with just a date. What you have to do is convert that date into something that it can do Boolean operators against, like greater than, less than. So what we've got here is we've converted our published date into what we're going to call our minimum date, and that is take our published date, convert it into Unix, which is just a number formatting for a date. The further the date is in the future, the bigger the number, and then convert that string of numbers into a number. So that's our minimum date. So we're saying find me any events that happened from the published date. And then we set a maximum date, which is the same thing, except this time we're going to add to our published date the number of weeks we want as a number of weeks, and then convert it into Unix again. So essentially, this is the published date plus 3 weeks. So this is our range that we want to find events in. Then if we go in the events table, we have 3 events here. There are 2 that happen in the next few weeks and 1 that happens later in the year. So ideally in our automation, we want it to find the conference day and the open day, but not to find the end of year party. At the moment, you can see there's a link back to the podcast for when that's populated, and also a date field, which again is converting the date into Unix so that it can compare that number to the range that we just specified in podcasts. The last thing I've shown here is that not only would you be able to link to those events, but also you could add additional fields on the events table and pull all of that information into the podcasts, not just the event title, essentially. So here, all I've done is just concatenated the name of the event with the date that it's happening. So what we'll do, let's bring our linked events back over here, and we'll have a look at our automation. Call this match events. So this automation is triggered when a record matches a condition. So when a podcast has a published date, which means the published date is not empty, we want to find records in the events table based on a condition. And these are the 2 conditions that we've been talking about setting up. So the first one is that the date of the event happens after or on the published date, right? So published date and then anything after. But also the date of the event is on or before 3 weeks after the published date. And those are our 2 conditions. So we have a look at the test here. I've tested it on the first record, the first podcast, which has a date of today. And you can see here that it's now added in and found conference day and open day. And it's missed out that 3rd event, which is too far in the future. So great, it's finding the right thing. Now the last thing to do is to update our record in the podcasts table. I will update the one that triggered this automation, and then I'll say update the field for upcoming events, and I want you to link to every one of the record IDs that we just found in the events table. Cool, so let's turn that on. So we'll remove our publish date. So as you'll see here, we now don't have a minimum date or a maximum date because we don't know when it's published. We set a publish date. That automation will run. It found and linked to our 2 events. And lastly, we can now retrieve through rollup information about those events. Hope that's helpful. Thanks very much.